On the 24th of June, 2026, at 4 minutes past 6 in the evening, the coast of northern Venezuela moved twice in 39 seconds. Magnitude 7.2, and then, before the first had finished, 7.5. In La Guaira, the buildings did not topple. They sat down, floor onto floor, with the people still inside. By the 29th, the confirmed dead had passed 1,700, then 2,000, more than 11,000 injured, and tens of thousands nobody could account for. Rescue crews came from 27 countries, and they brought dogs, and cameras that read heat, and microphones fine enough to hear a heartbeat through a meter of concrete. They also brought men like the one you are about to hear from. You don't see them on the news. They arrive before the diggers. They walk up to a building that is half standing and half gone, and they decide one thing: whether anyone is allowed to go inside. They read the cracks, the lean, the load path, and they make a call the rescuers are not permitted to argue with. Safe, not safe. His name is Efraín, 31 years a structural engineer. He has stood in front of more collapsed buildings than he can count, and he will tell you, plainly, that he has never once been moved by what a family needed to be true. His whole profession comes down to a single sentence: the number does not care how much you love the person under the slab. On the third night, he assessed an 8-story block in La Guaira. 2 people were believed to be alive beneath it, a mother and her newborn. Efraín did the arithmetic and put his name to a red tag that meant, in plain terms, no one goes in. Leave them. Sending a team into that will kill the team. And then, a few hours later, he did the one thing his own signature forbade. He is not a religious man. He'll say so himself more than once, and he won't soften it. So we are going to let him lay this out the way he lays out everything: the readings, the timings, the one thing on his instrument that he still cannot account for. And you can decide what to do with it.
My name is Efraín Colmenares. I'm a structural engineer, 31 years, most of it forensic, which means I'm usually called after something has already come down. It's a strange specialty to end up in. Most engineers spend their careers making sure buildings stand. I spent mine walking through the ones that didn't, working out why, and increasingly, because I'm good at it and there is never any shortage of the work, deciding whether the part that's still up is going to stay that way long enough for anyone to go inside. I've worked earthquakes, a gas explosion, a motorway bridge, 2 building collapses you would know by name if I said them, which I won't. I'm recording this at my desk, which is not where I'm comfortable talking about any of it. There's a laptop open in front of me with a file on it that I'll get to. I'd honestly rather show you the file than say the rest out loud. But the file means nothing without the rest. So here we are, and I'll try to do it in order, because order is the only way I know how to do anything. Let me tell you how I think, because everything after this depends on it. A building doesn't have opinions, it doesn't have intentions, it doesn't have moods, and it does not care in the slightest what you need from it. What it has is a load path, the route the weight takes down through the structure to the ground, and either that route is intact or it isn't. When you strip away everything a person feels about a structure, everything they remember happening in it, everyone they've lost in it, what is actually left is arithmetic, dead load, live load, the safety factor, the margin between the force a member can carry and the force it's being asked to carry. I have spent my whole life on the side of the arithmetic, and I have been on the whole glad to be there, because the arithmetic is the one thing in this world that will not lie to you at the exact moment you most want it to. People lie. Hope lies. Hope is the most fluent liar I've ever met. The number just sits there and tells you what is. I found that restful. I still do. I need to stay with the ordinary part longer, because miracles do not happen in empty space. They happen inside a life that already has weight on it. Before that night, my days were not dramatic. They were shifts, forms, radios, boots drying by a door, the taste of coffee that had been reheated too many times, the private habit of checking every exit in every room without meaning to. People imagine a witness as someone waiting for heaven to interrupt him. I was not waiting for anything. I was trying to get through the next call without adding another name to the list I carried. There is also a technical part people skip because it sounds cold. But the cold part is where the truth lives. A collapse is not a pile. It is a machine that has broken but is still moving. Every slab leans on another slab. Every pocket of air exists because some impossible angle held for one more hour. And every decision you make steals weight from one place and gives it to another. You do not rush because rushing is how you kill the person you came for. You measure, you listen, you place your hand flat and wait for the concrete to tell you whether it is settling or speaking. The first hours after the earthquake did not feel like hours. They felt like one long inhalation the whole city could not release. Dust made the streetlights look underwater. People walked with objects in their hands and no idea why they had saved that object and not another one. A shoe, a phone charger, a framed photograph. The human mind grabs at small things when the large thing is too large to hold. I remember thinking that if I let myself see the whole coast at once, I would stop functioning. So I made the world smaller. One grid, one voice, one void, one decision. I should tell you why I trust it that much. Because it isn't a personality trait, and I wasn't born like this. It was made. It was built into me, the way a scar is built, out of one specific thing that happened. A little over 20 years ago, when I was young in the work and still thought being right and being kind were the same activity, I signed off on an entry. A partial collapse, a block of flats, a gas main underneath it. People believed to be alive inside. There was a family at the cordon, a woman screaming, and two men holding her up by the arms. And the sound she was making is a sound I could still reproduce for you if I were a crueler man. And I stood there with my clipboard and my readings, and I let hope do about 10% of the calculation. Just 10. I told myself the margin was there, that the numbers were close enough, that the difference between what the structure could take and what I was about to put on it was inside the error bars, that a good man finds the yes. I wanted to be the one who found the yes. So I found it, I sent them in, and the structure came down during the operation, and we lost two of ours. One of them was a rescue lead I'd worked with for years. The other was a younger engineer, 26, who was under that building in the first place partly because I had stood in front of everyone and said it would hold. It did not hold. I don't talk about them. I won't now, beyond this. I helped carry one of them out, and I have never in my life been so aware of the weight of a person, or so aware that the arithmetic which said that building was fine had been my arithmetic, and I had put my thumb on it. After that, I stopped letting the 10% in. All of it, not most of it, all of it. Not safe became the most honest thing I knew how to say, and I learned to say to people's faces while they begged me, and mean it, and not move. That sounds like coldness. It is the opposite of coldness. Saying it and holding it kept people alive for 2 decades, kept rescue crews from dying beside the ones they were trying to reach, which is the specific way people die at these sites. The second wave dying to reach the first. That is not a feeling, that's a record. I could show you the record. The 2 names I couldn't save are the reason for every name I could, and I have made my peace with the arithmetic of that, the way you make peace with a wound you've decided to keep open on purpose. So, La Guaira. I came in on the 3rd day with one of the structures assessment teams, the people who go in ahead of the rescuers and tell them where they are allowed to be. It is genuinely hard to describe the place to someone who wasn't standing in it. Try to picture a whole coastline of buildings that had, in the language we use, pancaked, which is exactly as ugly as it sounds. Floor slabs dropped flat down onto one another, 10 floors compressed into the height of 3, a half meter of void here and there, where a beam or a car or a fallen wardrobe happened to hold a gap open. And inside those voids, sometimes, people. Nothing was plumb, nothing was square. Everything was still moving, still settling, finding its new shape a millimeter at a time. And there was the smell of it, which I won't describe except to say that it has 3 layers, and you learn to breathe through the first 2 and not think about the third. Aftershocks came through every hour or so. each one a small vote for the whole street finishing what the main shock had started. And over all of it, constantly, the noise. Generators, hydraulic cutters, the diesel roar of the diggers, and underneath all of that, threaded through it, the sound of people calling names down into gaps in the concrete, as though the concrete might answer. Some of the time, it did. That's the thing that keeps everyone there past the point of sense. Some of the time it answers. Our job was triage. You walk a building, you read it, and you paint a mark on it. Green means the crews can work it. Yellow means work it with a spotter and get out when I say. Red means no one sets foot inside, for any reason, for anyone. That mark is mine to give. And here is the part civilians never quite believe. Once I give the red one, the rescue teams stand down. They don't argue. They don't go in behind my back. 30 years of men dying under second collapses has beaten that discipline into this profession. And it is the entire reason I am there. I am not there to save anyone. I want to be plain about that because it's the crux of everything. I am there to decide who is allowed to try. The rescuers save people. I decide the terms. The block that this is about was 8 stories, residential, one street back from the water. Half of it was simply gone, sheared clean off, out in the road as rubble that had already been picked over. The half still standing was leaning, a lean you could actually see against the horizon line, which is never ever good. And worse than the lean was the fact that it was creeping, increasing, slowly, while I stood there watching it, in the one direction a leaning thing under gravity ever goes. There was a young man at the cordon, a brother, absolutely, immovably certain that his sister and her baby were alive on what had been the 8th floor. And here is the thing that made this the worst version of my job instead of just a hard one. He was probably right. An acoustic team had picked up a tapping from deep in the pile, and it wasn't random. It came in threes. 3 taps, then a pause. Then 3 taps, then a pause. I want you to understand why that detail matters so much to a man like me. Concrete settling does not tap in threes. Aftershocks do not tap in threes. Water dripping, debris shifting, a structure groaning as it fails. None of it organizes itself into threes. 3, pause, 3, pause is a hand. It is a person who knows that someone might be listening and is spending what strength they have left on a pattern, because a pattern says human, a pattern says come. Somebody in that building was alive and asking. So now everything human in me wanted the answer to change. That's the whole test of this job. And it never gets easier, it gets harder. Because you'd think 3 decades would build up a callus, and instead, it wears a groove. Someone is alive in there, and it does not get to change the answer. That is the discipline. That is honestly the entire discipline. The rest is just knowing how to read a wall. And there was a clock running on top of all of it. Everyone who walks these sites knows the number without having to look it up. Somewhere past 72 hours under the concrete, without water, almost nobody comes out alive. We were already inside that window and running down the far end of it. A local official, a decent man, exhausted, not a fool, came and stood next to me at the cordon and asked me, quietly, not unkindly, whether I was completely sure, whether there wasn't some corner of it, some approach, some way to thread a small team into the seaward side. I understood exactly what he was doing, because it's what I would have done. He was asking me to find him a number that said yes. He wanted me to go back and look again and come out with a different answer. So I did go back. I walked the whole structure a second time, member by member. The north core, the 2 surviving columns, the slabs, the fracture lines, everything. Not because I expected the numbers to change, but because a man asking me that, with what was at stake, deserves to watch me look twice. The numbers did not move. They never move because you want them to. That is the entire reason you're allowed to trust them. Then I put instruments on it because I don't like to red tag a building on my eye alone when I can red tag it on data. Crack meters across the main fractures, a tilt meter on the leaning wall, a device that measures, to a fraction of a degree, exactly how far off vertical that wall is leaning, logging a reading every few seconds down to the laptop, so that instead of standing there guessing from the feel of it, I could watch the building fail in real numbers. And the numbers were unambiguous. The lean was increasing, slowly, steadily, without pause, all of it in one direction, toward its own completion, toward the ground, toward finished. The entire surviving load path ran through a North Star core and two columns that my assessment put at, or just slightly past, their capacity. My read was simple and it was ugly, and I have never in 30 years made a cleaner one. This structure is going to finish coming down on its own soon, and anything that disturbs it, a man's weight on a slab, the vibration of a cutter, a single shifted piece of debris, brings that timeline forward. If I send a team in there to reach the 8th floor, the most probable outcome, by a very wide margin, is that I bury my own team on top of the family they went in to save. I have been in that exact place before, once, 20 years before. I knew, to the decimal, what the 10% cost, because I had already paid it once, in the only currency that matters. And I had sworn over 2 graves that I would never let myself be talked into paying it again. So I did my job. I signed the red tag. Imminent secondary collapse. No entry. And then I did the part that no one thanks you for. I walked to the cordon and I found a brother and I told him the truth, which is the cruelest thing I own and the only thing I had to give him. I told him that his sister might well be alive, and I told him that the most responsible thing I could do for her was to not send more people in to die in the dark beside her. I didn't dress it up. I've learned not to. The dressing only gives people something to argue with, and there was nothing to argue. He didn't shout at me. I almost wish he had. He just looked at me, the way you'd look at the earthquake itself, at the plates of the earth, at a thing too large and too indifferent to hate properly. I've had that look before. It doesn't leave you. It goes into the ledger with the rest. The teams pulled back off the building at dusk. They left the floodlights burning on it, big portable arrays, throwing hard white light up the face of the lean and 100 meters of empty, cordoned ground all around it, and my instruments still logging away in the dark, patient, indifferent, doing the one thing I trust. And then I did the thing I always do at the end of a day like that, the thing I have never told another living person until now. I went back, alone. Not to change the call. I want to be exact about this, because it matters for everything that comes after. Not to reopen it, not to look for the yes, to confirm it. I wanted to sit down next to that tiltmeter and watch the number climb, the way I'd said it would, because if it climbed, then I was right. And being right is the only thing that has ever let me sleep on the far side of a day when I've had to tell a man to leave his sister in the ground. I needed the arithmetic to hold. That night, it was the only thing standing between me and the 2 people I had just left in the dark. So I stepped over my own cordon. I walked in under the lean of a building I had personally forbidden every other living person on that street from entering. And I sat down on a broken slab in front of the laptop, in the hard white edge of the floodlight, and I watched the number. That's the moment it stopped being a night I can explain.
Stop here for a second. With Efraín standing in front of a building he has just condemned, his own name on the tag. Let me be straight with you about what this channel is, because it isn't the usual thing. We don't shout. We're not going to tell you what to believe. We look for the cases where a careful, skeptical person walked right up to the edge of what they could explain, and we let them take you to that edge and no further. If that's worth something to you, subscribe. That's the whole ask. It's the only way these reach the next person who needs one. Because everything up to this point, Efraín can account for. The lean, the load path, the red tag, that's just engineering, and he's good at it. What happens next, he has spent a year trying to file under something reasonable. He still has the instrument log. He's read it 100 times. And he keeps ending up in the same place. Let him take it from there. Stay with the story through the turn, because this is the part where a rescue stops being only procedure and becomes the question every witness in this channel has to answer. What do you do when the impossible gives you an instruction specific enough to obey? Stay with the story through the turn, because this is the part where a rescue stops being only procedure and becomes the question every witness in this channel has to answer. What do you do when the impossible gives you an instruction specific enough to obey? Stay with the story through the turn, because this is the part where a rescue stops being only procedure and becomes the question every witness in this channel has to answer. What do you do when the impossible gives you an instruction specific enough to obey?
It was 11 minutes past 3 in the morning. I know the exact time, not because I remember it. Memory is worthless, but because it is in the log. The tiltmeter timestamps every single reading it takes, and I have since matched everything that happened to that timeline, to the second, the way you would want me to. The way I would demand of anyone bringing me a story like this one. Let me tell you what the instrument was doing first, because the instrument is the part I can defend. The tilt had been increasing all night. The wall was closing toward its own collapse in a smooth, one-directional creep. The reading climbing, a clean rising line on the screen. And I need you to understand that this is the only direction it can go. A leaning wall under gravity does not straighten itself back up. It has no reason to and no means to. There is no engine in a pile of dead concrete. No stored energy waiting to push the mass back toward vertical against its own weight. It goes one way, down, over, toward the ground until it arrives there. That is not my opinion, and it is not a rule of thumb. It is the flaw under my entire profession. If leaning walls could right themselves, nothing I know would be true. At 11 minutes past 3, the reading reversed. Not leveled off, not slowed, reversed. The wall moved back, away from collapse, toward vertical, by a measurable amount, and then it held there. On the screen, you can see it plainly. A line climbing and climbing and climbing, and then a clean step in the wrong direction, and then flat, stable. I have since shown that trace to 2 other structural engineers, good ones, without telling them a single word of the story around it, just the trace. Cold. Both of them did precisely what I would have done. They immediately started looking for the fault in the instrument, a knock to the housing, a thermal artifact, a loose mounting, a bad cable, a software glitch in the logger, because that is what it has to be. A reversal like that has to be an error, because the alternative isn't allowed. But I was there. Nothing touched it. I was 3 meters away, sitting still, not so much as breathing on it. And to move that wall physically back the amount the instrument recorded and hold it would take a load, a real force, applied from somewhere, tons of it. And I will tell you with my whole professional life behind the words, there was no somewhere. There was nothing there to do it. I was still staring at the number, trying to make it be a malfunction, when the air changed. I don't have good language for this next part, and I've decided I'm not going to reach for someone else's, because borrowed words would be a kind of lie, and I've done enough of those about this night already. The air had been cold, that wet, coastal, 3 in the morning cold that gets down into the bones of your hands and stays. And then, without a sound, without a source, the air had weight in it, warmth. The specific way a room changes when someone has come in quietly behind you and is standing very still, and some animal part of you registers the presence before any of the senses you trust in a report can tell you how. Every instinct I have, and after 30 years in dead buildings I have good ones. They've kept me alive. Every one of them was suddenly certain that I was not alone under that lean, so I turned around. There was a figure inside the building. Inside, past the cordon, past my own red tag, up on the debris where the hard edge of the floodlight falls off into black, standing exactly where no living person could possibly have been standing, because I had spent the entire previous day proving, with instruments, that that ground would kill anything that put its weight on it. Just an outline of a man, no more than that at first. I couldn't make out a face, and I'll be honest with you, I did not try to. I didn't lift my eyes to it. I have thought a great deal since about why I didn't, and the truest thing I can say is that some part of me understood, immediately and without being told, that the face was not mine to look at. What I looked at instead were the feet, because the engineer in me, even then, even in that, needed to know what he was standing on. He was barefoot, on broken slab, on twisted rebar, on the field of shattered glass I had walked around all day in steel-toed boots. And he was not cutting his feet. There was no blood, no flinch, no caretaking with the placement of a step. He simply stood on it, the way you'd stand on a lawn. And off him, across those 3 meters of freezing dark, came that warmth. Not from the floodlight, which was behind me, throwing my own shadow toward him. A warmth like the warmth that comes off a living body when you stand close to it in a cold room. Then he said my name, not out loud. I have to be precise about this, because precision is genuinely the only thing I have to offer you here. And if I lose it, I lose everything. The sound did not come in through my ears. It arrived in my chest, on the left side, low, as if the one speaking were standing inside the wall of it, and I were hearing it from the inside out. And it was my name, not Mr. Colmenares, not the flat, careful way a stranger reads it off the laminated card on my lanyard, the short way, the way exactly 2 or 3 people alive have ever said it, the way it's said by someone who was there for the whole of you, who was present, somehow, for the collapse I signed off on when I was young and stupid and hopeful, and for the 2 we buried, and for every red tag I have painted since as a kind of penance, and for this one, tonight. My name, said with all of that inside it, every year of it, and no blame in it, none. That was the thing that took me apart, if I'm honest, more than the barefoot man or the impossible number. I had braced, without knowing I was bracing, for the accusation, for the voice that finally says it out loud. 2 dead on your arithmetic, and now 2 more you've left in the ground. And what came instead was my name, holding all of it, and no blame in it at all. I deal in evidence for a living. I would love to tell you that I stayed on my feet, stayed analytical, catalogued it. I didn't. I went down onto the debris, onto my knees on the broken slab, and I have no engineering account of my own body in that moment to give you. And he told me 3 things, that's all. Everything he said was short, and there were 3 of them. He said, the North Stair Core is holding. The North Stair Core. I want you to understand what that sentence did to me. In my assessment, the one I'd signed hours before, the one on the red tag, the North Stair Core was the first element I expected to fail. I had written it up that very afternoon in my own hand as the critical weakness of the whole structure, the member whose collapse would unzip everything above it. And he was telling me, flatly, that the exact thing I had condemned as the first to go was the one thing in the entire building still bearing the load. He said, there is a mother and her child under the 8th floor slab on the seaward side. They are alive. And he said, go in through the core, now. And then it was over. Not switched off. Nothing so sharp as that. It faded, the way the warmth leaves a mug you've wrapped your hands around, gradually, until there was just me, on my knees, and a cold building, and a number on a screen that had no physical right to be where it was sitting. I have spent my entire adored life telling people, teaching people, junior engineers, in classrooms with slides, that you do not enter a compromised structure on a feeling. And I got up off that slab and I overrode my own red tag on a feeling. I need you to understand precisely what that is, for me specifically, not in general. It is the exact sin that killed 2 people I knew 20 years ago. It is the 10%. It is hope in the arithmetic. It is the one thing I swore, standing over their graves, that I would never do again for the rest of my life. And I did it. I walked out from under the lean and I found the team lead and I woke him and I told him I had reassessed the North Core and I wanted a narrow entry driven through it to the 8th floor slab on the seaward side. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind because I had red tagged that building in front of all of them 12 hours earlier, and I am not a man who reverses himself. He asked me what had changed, and here is where I became a liar in the service of the truth. I told him the tilt had reversed and stabilized, which was true. It was right there on the log, time-stamped, undeniable, and I let him assume that the reversal was the whole reason, that it was engineering, that some redistribution I'd modeled had bought us a window. The core will hold, I said. I did not tell him why I believed it. I couldn't have said the real reason out loud without ending my career inside the same sentence, and I judged, coldly even then, that 2 lives were worth more than my credibility. So I spent the credibility. They went into the North Stair Core, and it held. Every step, every hour, it held. The single element my model had marked to fail first was the one solid, continuous, load-bearing path in the entire ruined structure, exactly as I had been told, 3 meters from my instrument, in the dark, by a barefoot man standing on glass. They threaded up through it and they reached a void under the 8th-floor slab on the seaward side. And in that void, a pocket of air roughly the size of a wardrobe, held open by a falling beam, more than 30 hours after the second shock, was a young mother and her baby, 18 days old, alive. The child was dehydrated and the mother was barely conscious, and there was a great deal that had to happen carefully over the following hours, but they were alive. Before they could cut the two of them free, they fed the baby water through a drinking straw pushed down the length of a broken conduit, drop by drop, in the dark, hours before there was any way to get them out. And then, eventually, they got them out. Both of them. Both lived. The baby didn't have a mark on him. I want to sit on that with you for a second, as an engineer, because I have written the impact figures for falls like the one that child took. 8 floors. I know what a fall like that does to a body, and I know to a moral certainty what it does to a newborn. Nothing survives it. So I asked. Later, I told myself it was professional, that I needed to close the loop, understand the load case, and maybe that was even partly true. I asked the mother, her name is Yelitsa, what the two of them had come down onto, and she told me that as the floor gave way, she had turned and pulled the baby in against her chest, and the two of them had fallen onto her bag, and inside the bag, taking the blow directly under the small body of her son, was a Bible, a book. Her grandmother, she said. She'd carried it for years, out of love for the old woman more than anything. And she told me, she didn't have to tell me this, but she did, that she had never once opened it. The thing that bore the load, in a building where my calculation of every load path in it had been comprehensively, catastrophically wrong, was a book she had never read. I'm not going to perform a conversion for you here. Whatever happened to me is smaller than that word and harder, and I don't fully have the shape of it yet a year on. I am a man whose entire life rested on a single belief, that the number is the floor under everything, the thing that holds when feeling gives way, the one honest surface in a dishonest world. And that night I watched the number lie in the direction of mercy. The instrument moved with no load to move it. The condemned member held. The fatal fall landed on a book. Every safe, correct, defensible thing I know how to do said leave them. And the two of them are alive tonight because, for about 90 seconds, I stopped trusting the thing I have trusted my whole life, and trusted something else instead. Something came loose in me under that lean that I had bolted down over 2 graves 20 years ago, and I have not, in the years since, been able to talk it back down. Weeks afterward, a chaplain who'd been attached to one of the teams, I told him a flattened version of it. Just the instrument, just the reading, none of the rest. Read me a single line. He said it was a builder's line, that of all people I'd appreciate it. The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. I build for a living. Rejecting the stone that won't carry the load, cutting out the member that fails the calculation, is the entire job. It is what the red tag is. And the stone I had rejected, the North Core, the condemned void, the unopened book, was the exact thing holding up the two people I had already written into the ground. He didn't push it any further than that. He didn't try to close me. He just set the line down in front of me and left it there. It hasn't left. I have gone over the seconds after that more times than I can count. Not because I think repetition will make them normal, but because rescue men replay decisions the way pilots replay landings. Where was my hand? What did the line touch? Who was standing behind me? What did the instrument show at that exact second? Every time I rebuild it, the same wall appears. There was no path from what I could know to what I knew. I can explain fear. I can explain instinct. I can explain a lucky guess. I cannot explain detailed knowledge of a hidden turn inside a crushed pipe I had never seen. The evidence afterward did not make it easier. In a normal rescue, evidence settles you. It lets the mind close the file. Here it opened the file wider. The blocked route was really blocked. The silent instrument was really silent. The timing was really the timing. Men who were there remember me changing my hand before the sound came back. Nobody can give that memory a place to live, so they walk around it. I do not blame them. I walk around it too, some days. But the thing is still in the room. You can't put any of this in a report. I know, because I tried, and there is no field on the form for it. I filed the tilt reversal the only way I could file it and still signed my name underneath. Anomalous instrument reading, cause undetermined. That sentence is true. It is also a coffin, a small, sealed, professional box that I put the most important thing that has ever happened to me into, because it was the only container I was allowed to use. My colleagues know the shape of the official version. They know I overrode a red tag and got lucky. And in our line of work, got lucky is not a compliment. A near miss that happens to end well is still, structurally, exactly the thing that gets people killed. I have taught that to junior engineers for 30 years. I have built careers on hammering it into them. By my own lecture, delivered 100 times, I did something unforgivable that night, and it worked. And a mother and her son are alive. I have no way to hold both of those things at once, so I don't try to resolve them anymore. I just keep the log. I'm at my desk. The file is open in front of me as I say this. 3:11 in the morning, the line climbing, and then the clean step down, and then flat. I still cannot account for it. I have finally, this year, stopped expecting to. I'll assess a building tomorrow, and if the numbers say red, I'll red tag it without hesitation, because the numbers are still the best tool I have ever found, and I am not fool enough to put a good tool down. I've just had to make room, at 53 years of age, for the fact that they are a tool and not the whole of what's holding the world up. There was a load in that building with no source. I felt the warmth of it come off a man standing barefoot on glass. It knew my name, and it said it with no blame in it. And a mother and her son are alive tonight, because for once in my life I did the thing I had sworn I never would, and I trusted it instead of the number.
Efraín went back to work. He still assesses buildings. He still signs the tags. He says the job is exactly as important as it always was, and he'd red tag that same block again tomorrow on the numbers he had. What changed isn't his engineering. It's that he no longer believes the numbers are the whole list of things that are real. The mother and her son are alive. The boy came out of 8 floors of collapse without a mark on him, lying on top of a book his mother had never once opened. Efraín keeps the instrument log on his laptop, in a folder by itself. He has shown it to 2 people. Both of them changed the subject. We made this for 3 of you. For the one who trusts only what can be measured, who has built a whole life on the number, because the number, at least, never lied to you. Efraín built that same life. He isn't asking you to stop measuring. He's telling you the instrument moved, and there was nothing there to move it. For the one who once made the responsible call, the safe, correct, defensible call, and lost someone because of it, and has been paying for it quietly ever since. Efraín carried that for 11 years before this. You, of all people, should hear what he was told in the dark, by name. And for the one who is certain that being wrong once disqualifies you, that you don't get to be the one who's led anywhere, not with your record. Efraín's record says he overrode his own assessment on no evidence he could put in writing. It also says a mother and a child are alive. So here is the question we put to him, and we'll put it to you. If the reading on that instrument had stayed exactly where the physics said it would you have gone in? Leave it below. And read the replies. There are people down there who made the other call and are living with it. If this reached you, subscribe so it reaches the next person tonight. We don't ask for more than that. Next time, another man whose whole job was to trust an instrument. Someone who watched the wave arrive before it hit, and the reading he has never let anyone see. Look after yourself, and check the thing you're most sure of. And if you are still listening, do not treat that question like a slogan. Put yourself in the dark with one practical choice in your hand, and answer from there.